My name is Emily, and I live in Boone, North Carolina with my dog, Scout. Scout is my best companion. He's an Alaskan Klee-Kai mix, mostly black with streaks of white fur on his legs and face, and little dark rings around his icy blue eyes that make him look like a mischievous bandit. I adopted him from a shelter when he was just a pup, right after my fiancée left for Singapore to pursue a career opportunity. Scout was my anchor during those lonely nights when crawling into an empty bed felt unbearable. Later, when my fiancé decided to settle down with someone he met overseas, Scout was there to comfort me through the heartbreak. Scout is a high-energy dog, what you might call a natural trailblazer. While other dogs are content with casual walks, Scout thrives on long, rugged hikes. For years, I've been taking him every weekend to Pisgah National Forest, one of the few places he can run free. Dogs aren't made for being cooped up inside. They need to roam, explore, and breathe in the wild. And honestly, so do I. Pisgah became my retreat, a sanctuary from the grind of a demanding corporate job. But everything changed one crisp November day when I learned the hard way why people build walls and live in cities. The wilderness, as beautiful as it is, isn't always our ally. Scout loved the forest. For such a regal-looking dog, he had an endearing knack for being goofy. The woods brought out his playful side, his wide blue eyes sparkling as he dashed around with uncontainable energy. His exuberance never failed to make me laugh. That's why it was so jarring when I noticed a sudden change in his demeanor. My lively, fearless dog transformed into a trembling, whimpering shadow, never straying more than a few steps from me. His entire body quivered under my hand when I stroked his neck, and I could feel the fear radiating from him. My first thought was a predator, maybe a cougar, but I'd seen Scout react to predators before. He'd bark furiously and become aggressively protective. This time, he was silent and terrified. It crossed my mind that a bear might be nearby. There had been warnings about increased black bear activity in the area, but Scout wasn't just cautious, he was petrified. Whatever he sensed, it unnerved him in a way I'd never seen before. Scout made it clear he wanted to leave, and honestly, so did I. But we were deep in the forest, at least 2 hours from the trailhead. The hike back would be long, and the sense of unease grew heavier with each step. Scout kept glancing over his shoulder, his ears twitching at every sound, before darting ahead and circling back to me. I couldn't see or hear anything, but I could feel it. A weighty presence, unseen yet oppressive. Something was following us, and Scout knew it. The breaking point came when Scout froze in his tracks, his ears pinned back as he stared into the dense underbrush. His body was rigid, his nose twitching furiously. Then, with a deafening yelp, he bolted ahead, barking wildly. That's when I heard it. A low rustling behind me, followed by a deep, guttural breath. Sounded massive. My heart seized and pure instinct took over. I ran. Branches scratched at my face and arms as I tore through the forest, following Scout's frantic barks. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but the primal fear driving me forward was overwhelming. I stumbled, crashing hard onto the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and for a terrifying moment, I couldn't move. Then Scout was there, barking ferociously at whatever loomed behind us. His courage gave me strength. I scrambled to my feet, clutching his collar as we fled together. Scout's barking guided me through the chaos, even when he was out of sight. But my fear spiked again when I burst through a dense thicket and saw him standing at the edge of a river. Scout hated water. He'd avoid it at all costs, no matter how shallow or calm. Now, faced with the rushing stream, he froze. "Come on, Scout. You can do it," I pleaded, my voice shaking with desperation. But he only paced along the bank, his wide eyes filled with confusion and fear. Behind us, the rustling grew louder, closer. My heart broke as I watched Scout retreat into the woods, seemingly unable to overcome his terror. Then, like a miracle, he reappeared, sprinting toward the river at full speed. With an enormous leap, he launched himself across, landing clumsily but safely on the other side. I grabbed his collar, pulling him up the muddy embankment as we continued our desperate escape. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "Good boy, Scout. You're so brave." The chase felt endless. My legs burned, my chest ached, and every breath was a struggle. Finally, I collapsed near the edge of a clearing, my vision swimming as my body gave out. When I opened my eyes, I was in the back seat of a pickup truck. A hunter stood outside, offering me water and assuring me that Scout was safe inside their lodge. Relief overwhelmed me, and I sobbed as they explained how Scout had refused to leave my side, barking and whining until they found me. Later, as I sat in their lodge, I recounted what had happened. The hunters exchanged uneasy glances but offered no explanation for what could have been chasing us. I pressed them for answers, but they evaded the question. I've since researched what might inhabit those woods, but I've found no definitive answers. The only thing I know is that something dangerous lurks in those forests, and whatever it is, it's not a bear. Scout is lying by my side as I write this, ever loyal, ever watchful. I often wonder how I'll cope without him someday. But for now, I'm just grateful he was there when I needed him most. This is a plea. Please, I beg you, do not venture into the forests near Briarwood, Vermont. I've known those woods my whole life. I used to play there with my younger cousin when I was as young as 6. Believe me when I say something strange has started happening there. Something bad. It all began during a hike a few weeks ago in early April. Every spring, flocks of birds return from the southern regions to their summer nesting grounds. In these woods, countless birds would fill the trees, chirping their melodies, a natural declaration of territory. But this time, as I wandered beneath the bare branches scattered with last autumn's leaves, there wasn't a sound. No birds, no rustling, no other creatures stirring. This silence alarmed me for 2 reasons. First, animals often sense danger long before humans do. Their sharper instincts, be it smell, sound, or intuition, can pick up on threats we can't detect. If they had fled or refused to return, it could mean something very wrong was unfolding. Second, woods go unnervingly quiet when a predator is nearby. Birds freeze, hoping that whatever is stalking the area will pass them by unnoticed. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Feeling uneasy, I decided to cut my hike short and head back to my car. But then, something very strange happened. Despite my years of familiarity with these woods, I realized I was completely lost. The realization struck when I felt a dull ache throb through my head. I stopped for a moment, rubbing my temples, hoping the headache would ease. But when I looked around, an unfamiliar landscape stared back at me. It was disorienting, like being in a place I'd known forever but that now felt alien. Confused, I pulled out my compass to regain my bearings, only to find the needle behaving erratically. It wouldn't hold steady, drifting around as if unsure where north was. Though unnerving, I knew ways to navigate without a compass. For example, moss typically grows on the side of trees that receives the most sunlight, usually the south. However, when I inspected the tree trunks, I found moss growing on the southern sides, while the sun appeared to hang in the northern sky. This didn't make any sense, and the more I tried to rationalize it, the more panicked I became. But panic, I reminded myself, was dangerous. I calmed myself, resolved to keep walking toward what I thought was the direction of the nearest road. That's when I stumbled upon something I had never seen in all my years exploring those woods. An old, crumbling cabin. It looked ancient, like it hadn't been touched since the late 1970s. I couldn't understand how I had never seen it before. My cousin and I had explored every corner of those woods as kids, yet here it was standing like a forgotten relic. The logical thing to do was approach and knock, hoping someone inside might help me find my way. But as I moved closer, an odd sensation overcame me. A growing heaviness, like the air itself was pushing me back. Each step felt harder than the last, as if something unseen was trying to repel me. Finally, I reached the door and knocked. It creaked open slightly, revealing an interior as decrepit as the exterior. The door's locks had long rusted away, and the furniture inside was arranged in a way that suggested occasional visitors, though it was evident the cabin had been abandoned for years. Something in the far corner caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a collection of debris, but as I approached, I realized it was a wooden figurine perched on a stone pedestal. What I saw is almost impossible to describe. The idol, a tangled mass of wood, vines, and moss, radiated an aura of pure dread. My mind struggled to make sense of it, as if my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. A crushing anxiety gripped me, my headache returning with a vengeance. Somehow, I just knew deep in my soul that the figurine represented something evil, something beyond comprehension. I fled from the cabin without a second thought, sprinting into the forest like a frightened child. And here's where it gets even stranger. When I entered that cabin, it had been daylight. I couldn't have been inside for more than a few minutes. Yet, when I burst out the door, the woods were shrouded in darkness. Night had fallen, and I had no idea how or when. I ran until I found the highway. I ran until I reached my car. I drove home without stopping, desperate to leave that place behind. Since that day, I haven't been able to talk about what happened until now. I tried once with a friend who's an experienced hunter, but the words failed me. All I can say is this: stay away from the woods near Briarwood, Vermont. Every summer for the last few years, a group of friends and I have left our homes in Manchester, England, to visit the remote forests of Caithness in northern Scotland. Caithness is home to one of the most expansive forested areas in the UK, Strathclyde Woods. It's as untouched as nature gets here, with some sections so thick and overgrown that it seems no one has walked there in centuries, maybe even longer. These trips have always brought us a sense of peace, perspective, and a deep respect for the wilderness. But last summer's trip ended in one of the most terrifying and unforgettable experiences of my life, completely altering how I view both the world and the human mind. Each year, we take an overnight train across the border, followed by a hike to a place called Loch Ander. It's a private fishing lake, technically reserved for members of a local angling club. The waters there are stocked with fish, making it an easy spot for us to catch our dinner during a quick, stealthy visit. Honestly, 40 minutes tops, and we'd have plenty of fish, lightning fast by any fisherman's standards. But last year, we decided to try somewhere new, somewhere more adventurous. While poring over a map, we spotted another lake, Loch Garryan, about 25 miles east. It seemed like an ideal alternative, a quieter, more remote fishing spot. And it was. While the catches weren't as quick or plentiful as at Loch Ander, it came with less guilt. Everything seemed to be going perfectly until our second night there. That's when something happened that none of us will ever forget. We were sitting around a campfire, sharing drinks and stories when one of my friends suddenly jumped up and recoiled, staring past the fire. "Who's that?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. His tone wasn't alarmed yet, just cautious. "Who's who?" someone replied lazily. "Someone's moving through the trees back there," he said, pointing toward the forest behind me. I laughed, thinking he was trying to spook us, but his expression quickly told me he wasn't joking. A wave of unease hit me, and I jumped up, spinning around with my flashlight in hand. The tension in our group was palpable as we scanned the trees, our beams darting across trunks and thickets. There was nothing, no sign of anyone or anything. "Hello?" Someone called out nervously, only to be hushed by the rest of us. We didn't want to give away our position, but at the same time, we needed to know if someone was out there watching us. Silence answered us. "Mate, you've had too much to drink," I said, trying to calm him down. "I haven't even touched my flask," he shot back. "I swear I saw someone. Big. Like, really big. Only big thing here is your imagination," another friend joked. "Get some sleep. Long day tomorrow." He reluctantly dropped it, but none of us slept well that night. Even after such a long journey, the thought of someone or something stalking us kept us all on edge. The next morning, we dragged ourselves to the lake with our fishing gear. Loch Garayan was stunning, surrounded by hills and blanketed in mist. Normally, we'd appreciate such a serene setting, but the mood among us was dampened, not just by the gray, drizzly weather, but by the memory of the previous night's scare. Midway through fishing, the same friend suddenly shouted, "Look, over there." He was pointing across the lake. "Did you see that?" "What?" I asked, alarmed. "Something came out of the trees over there, then disappeared. Tell me you saw it." We didn't. None of us had seen anything. He grabbed his gear and bolted back to camp, one of the others following to calm him down. The rest of us exchanged uneasy glances. Whatever he thought he'd seen, it was enough to scare him senseless. We were supposed to stay a full week, but that second night was our last. Despite convincing him to stay one more night, things escalated. Around midnight, he burst out of his tent, waking us all. "Do you hear that?" he whispered frantically. We strained to listen, but the forest was eerily silent. There wasn't a sound, no wind, no animals. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing to hear." But he was scratching at his ears, rocking back and forth, gritting his teeth as if trying to block out some unbearable noise. It dawned on me then, whatever he was hearing wasn't real. It was all in his head. Hey Reddit, I'm Sophia, and I live in the lush Pacific Northwest, specifically in the beautiful state of Oregon. One of my goals for 2021 was to shed the extra pounds I'd gained during my first pregnancy. That weight had knocked my confidence and left me feeling out of shape. My husband always reassured me that he loved me as I was, but I wanted to feel good about myself again. It may sound old-fashioned, but I like to look my best for him, just like he always makes an effort for me. The trouble was, I'd never liked the atmosphere in mixed-gender gyms. Some places seemed more about socializing and less about working out, and the women-only gyms near me were small and poorly equipped. So I decided to try hiking. I thought being out in nature would be great for my mental health too, and it had already helped me deal with postpartum depression. I still remember how thrilled I was when I went to an outdoor store to pick up sturdy hiking boots and some colorful waterproof gear. Mostly in lavender, my favorite shade. Felt like the start of something exciting. I even joined a hiking forum online to get advice on lightweight gear and couldn't wait to share updates on my progress. But my first serious solo hike didn't go as planned. It was far from the calming, uplifting experience I'd hoped for. It turned into a lesson on how unpredictable and dangerous nature can be. My husband agreed to watch our baby so I could drive to Cascade National Forest for an afternoon hike. The first hour went wonderfully. I pushed myself uphill, feeling my muscles burn, and then relished the relief of descending slopes. Felt amazing, invigorating and freeing. That was until I tripped. I must have caught my boot on a hidden root or rock because the next thing I knew, I was on the ground, clutching my ankle in pain. I could still put a bit of weight on it, so I figured it wasn't broken, but it hurt a lot. Then, something surprising happened. A crow, a sleek, black-feathered bird, flew down from a tree and landed on a branch nearby. It flapped its wings and made a racket, cawing loudly as if it were trying to check on me. It seemed so curious and almost concerned. I laughed nervously and told it, "I'm fine," just startled myself. And it quieted down, tilting its head to look at me with those shiny, dark eyes. Even though my ankle was sore, I got up, said goodbye to my new feathered companion, and started limping back toward my car. But to my surprise, the little crow followed me. It flitted from tree to tree, cawing occasionally as if to keep me company. I was touched. It felt like nature's way of offering comfort when I needed it most. Unfortunately, my ankle began to swell, and the pain intensified with each step. As I sat on a fallen log to rest, the throbbing pain brought back memories of labor. Overwhelmed, I started crying. Just then, the crow swooped down and started cawing and flapping again, as if trying to cheer me up. It was such a sweet moment, like something out of a fairy tale, a crying woman and her loyal bird friend. But the magical moment shattered when I heard something in the woods above me. A rustling sound. Something big was moving through the trees. Then I saw it. A massive bear, fresh out of hibernation, staring straight at me. The crow suddenly became frantic, cawing louder than ever and flapping wildly. At first, I thought it was warning me. I quickly realized I was wrong. The bear started charging downhill, its eyes locked on me. Thankfully, I'd taken advice from my hiking group and bought the strongest bear spray I could find. Heart racing, I grabbed it, flicked off the safety, and sprayed a thick cloud of yellow mist into the air. The bear ran straight into it, stopped abruptly, and began sneezing and coughing violently. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I forced myself to run, ignoring the pain in my ankle, until I finally reached my car. Somehow, I made it home. Later, when I calmed down, I did some research on crows. What I'd thought was a sweet, Disney-like friendship wasn't that at all. Crows are known to alert predators, like bears, to injured animals. After the predator eats, the crow scavenges the remains. That day, I realized I was lucky to have escaped being part of nature's food chain. Mount Fuji, one of Asia's tallest volcanoes, is revered as a sacred symbol in Japan and a cultural treasure. On clear days, the mountain's perfectly symmetrical, snow-covered peak is visible from the bustling capital of Tokyo, providing a serene contrast to city life. Frequently depicted in art and postcards, Mount Fuji is a globally recognized icon of Japanese beauty. Nestled on the northwestern side of Mount Fuji lies a 230 square kilometer forest atop hardened lava, called Aokigahara. Known as the Sea of Trees, this dense woodland absorbs sound due to its porous volcanic rock, offering visitors an eerie sense of silence. This natural phenomenon, paired with the forest's reputation, draws both nature enthusiasts and those with darker intentions. Aokigahara is infamous in Japanese folklore as a place haunted by eerie, or restless spirits. Over the years, it has tragically become a well-known site for people seeking to end their lives. To deter such actions, authorities have placed signs at key trails urging individuals to reconsider and offering contact information for helplines. Despite these measures, incidents persist. In 2003 alone, over 100 bodies were discovered in the forest, up from 78 the previous year. By 2010, police reported that over 200 people had attempted to end their lives there, with around 50 succeeding. Most cases involve methods like overdoses or hanging, though other means have been observed. This grim pattern often spikes in March, coinciding with the end of Japan's fiscal year, highlighting the societal pressures many face. Efforts to reduce the forest's grim reputation include suppressing statistics to discourage its use for such acts. Aokigahara's tragic allure has been linked, in part, to popular literature. A novel titled Nami no To, The Tower of Waves published in 1961 by Saicho Matsumoto, tells the story of a couple who enter the forest to end their lives together. Though considered one of Japan's most romantic tales, its association with the site has contributed to its reputation. Another controversial book, The Complete Manual of Suicide by Wataru Tsurumi, published in 1993, provides explicit instructions on methods of self-harm. Despite the author's claim that the book aims to make society more empathetic, its detailed approach stirred outrage, selling over 1 million copies and cementing its infamy. The forest's association with death, however, predates these works. A historical practice in Japan called abasut, which translates to abandoning the elderly, involved leaving infirm relatives in remote areas to die. Though largely abandoned by the 19th century, this custom has contributed to the belief that Aokigahara is haunted by spirits of those left to perish. In recent years, the forest gained international attention due to a widely criticized incident involving an American YouTuber, Logan Paul. During a trip to Japan, he filmed a video in Aokigahara, where he and his team encountered the body of a deceased individual. The video, which featured inappropriate jokes and reactions, sparked global outrage. Though the face of the deceased was blurred, the footage was deemed disrespectful. As a result, Paul's YouTube partnerships and projects were suspended, and the incident reignited discussions about mental health and cultural sensitivity. Japan continues to grapple with high suicide rates, with over 25,000 people taking their lives annually, or about 70 per day, most of whom are men. Notable cases, such as a 71-year-old man who set himself on fire aboard a train in 2014, highlight the societal struggles many face. These tragedies raise profound questions about the pressures of life, the value of mental health support, and the human condition itself. Even amidst Aokigahara's dark history, glimmers of hope exist. Ribbons tied to trees guide those who may reconsider their decisions back to safety, symbolizing a chance for redemption and connection in an otherwise silent and haunting place. The most chilling story I've ever heard came from my great-uncle. He was a soldier during World War II and enlisted the day he turned 19, on February 15, 1945. His timing meant he avoided both the D-Day landings and the immediate aftermath, but he found himself thrust into an even grimmer chapter of the conflict, the Allied invasion of Germany itself. With hindsight, it seems inevitable that Germany would lose the war, crushed by the combined might of the Allied and Soviet forces. But in the thick of the fighting, there was no certainty. On the battlefield in the dense forests and fields of Central Europe, Germany clung to the belief it could still prevail, relying on advanced weaponry, tactical resistance, or sheer willpower. This was the grim phase my great-uncle was drawn into, a campaign that was as horrifying as anything that had come before. The ordeal began during the Battle of Cologne on September 27, 1945. Cologne had become part of Germany's main defensive line, and the Allies wanted to capture it swiftly to open the path to the heavily industrialized Ruhr region. Just south of the city was a foreboding place called the Schwarzwald, or Black Forest, where tens of thousands of German troops were entrenched. The mission of my great-uncle's unit was to patrol the woods, locate enemy positions, and direct artillery or airstrikes against them. The morning was quiet at first, but chaos erupted when a single rifle shot dropped one of their men to the ground. The soldiers scrambled for cover as more shots echoed through the trees. It took several frantic minutes before they could even determine the direction of the attack. In that time, several others were struck down by the unseen marksman. Attempts to retreat were futile. The sniper methodically targeted anyone who tried to flee. Within moments, the entire unit was trapped, pinned down by a single German sharpshooter. As awful as that was, my great-uncle said the worst part came later. The radio operator, who had been one of the first to fall, lay lifeless in a small clearing. Each time a soldier tried to retrieve the radio to call for reinforcements, the sniper fired, forcing them back. One brave man managed to grab hold of the equipment, but the sniper shot him through the hand, severing tendons and rendering it useless. Without a working radio, the platoon was stranded, completely at the mercy of one man with a rifle. For hours, they stayed motionless, afraid to so much as twitch. Occasionally, someone would shift slightly or peek out to spot the sniper, only to be immediately shot. And every time the sniper fired, he laughed. A loud, mocking laugh that echoed eerily through the forest. Sometimes, he shouted something in German, which my great-uncle later learned translated roughly to, "Cry for your mothers, little boys." The sniper toyed with them for 6 excruciating hours. At one point, when he could no longer find active targets, he started shooting at the bodies of the dead. My great-uncle watched in horror as the man beside him, who had died slumped against a tree, was shot again and again. The first shot fractured the man's skull, but the sniper kept firing, turning his head into an unrecognizable mess of bone and blood. My great-uncle said that of all the gruesome injuries he saw during the war, head wounds were the most unsettling. A person's face changes so completely when the skull is shattered. The man who had been his comrade moments earlier was now someone or something he couldn't recognize. As night fell, the platoon finally made their escape. The sniper, undeterred, shouted insults after them, calling them cowards as his laughter echoed through the trees. My great-uncle remembered running as fast as he could, stumbling over roots and branches in the darkness. One soldier ran headfirst into a tree, breaking his nose, but didn't stop. My great-uncle passed away last year, and I wanted to share this story as a tribute to the courage and resilience he showed in a time of unimaginable hardship. Rest in peace.